Very good afternoon to all. I take immense pleasure in welcoming all the students for this exclusive webinar on India's contribution in the 21st century globalized world. Now, Flame Upskill's primary goal is to assist high school students in developing critical skills for their learning and growth. In this series, you will explore areas outside of your courses, which will help you build your profiles for higher education. Now, attendees, please note, whoever completes the entire session, whoever attends the entire session will receive a letter of participation. You will receive the letter by next week. I'll also post a link to the feedback form in the chat section. You must fill it in order to receive your letter of participation. This is a required procedure. Kindly make a note. Today's session will be taken by Professor Pankaj Jain. Professor Pankaj Jain is an internationally recognized academic leader in sustainability, Jain studies, film studies, and diaspora studies. He is the head of the Department of Humanities and Languages and the chair of the India Center at Flame University. Earlier, he was the founding co-chair of India Initiatives Group and associate professor in the departments of philosophy and religion and anthropology at the University of North Texas, a tier 1 American university. He holds a PhD from the University of Iowa and an MA from Columbia University, both in religious studies. He is currently working on his fourth monograph, Modern Jainism, a historical approach, co-editing the Encyclopedia of Hinduism and a volume on Indian and Western philosophical concepts in religion. In addition, Professor Jain compiles Jains and Hindus' history in America for his third monograph, Dharma in America, a short history of Hindu-Jain diaspora. He is also the author of the award-winning Dharma and Ecological of Hindu Communities, Sustenance and Sustainability and Science and Socio-Religious Revolution in India, Moving the Mountains. It's a pleasure to have you amongst us, sir, and I'm confident that the students will feel more knowledgeable by the end of the session. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Thank you, Roshni. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, yes.
Great to see 19 students all over from, I guess, all over from India, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, and on and on. It's really wonderful to speak to high schoolers. You know, we don't get to teach or get to speak with high schoolers anymore because I teach only undergraduates and postgraduates and so on. It's really an amazing opportunity for me to be able to speak to really young minds, young hearts. Of course, we all are young, but chronologically young, all of you are. Feel free to raise your hand. I would love to have, keep it maybe as interactive as possible. Any question that you come across while I'm talking, you can type in the chat window. Probably Roshni can also moderate those questions, but I would love to even incorporate while I'm speaking. So love to have you interact with me, and talk to me. Don't wait till the end. At least type your questions in the chat window. All right. So I guess I'll begin by sharing my PowerPoint presentation, and I hope you can see this now.
It is visible, sir.
Can teach, right? What India can teach us. This title itself is inspired by a book written by one of the most famous Indologists, a lover of India from Germany, from Europe, his name was Max Muller, and he wrote a book in 1881 when India was being ruled by the British and people were, the colonizers were exploiting India. Even in those troubled times, he was trying to take message, trying to learn something from India. So he came up with this book. So I thought that title still applies even in today's world. We who live in India today, even though I was in US for a long time, but now I live in India. My parents and other relatives live in India. I was born in Rajasthan. So what India can teach, not just the world, but what India can teach us, we who live in India, how much we have actually taken India seriously, India's traditions, India's knowledge traditions, cultural traditions, philosophical traditions. What can we learn from India? do we learn from India enough in our schools or colleges? So those are the questions that I want to give you some appetizing, intriguing ideas, and hopefully you will explore more, and hopefully you will take some notes from today's session, and then you develop on your own as you develop your career. My own little bit story, I'll tell you. I was 26 years of age. I completed my bachelor's in computer science, and I just received a visa to go to the US. But while I was ready to go to the US, my employer, who had invited two people one from Canada, one from North America, they came to Hyderabad to teach us Smalltalk and Java, the software languages. And as they were going back to their home countries in North America, my employer's HR department, they were giving them a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, a copy of the Shiv Kumar Sharma Santoor album, a copy of Hariprasad Chaurasia's Bansuri flute album. And that's where I was awestruck. I started wondering, I'm an Indian citizen and I call myself Indian, but my company is giving the Bhagavad Gita, Santoor and Sitar gifts to the foreigners, to people who came from foreign countries. We who live in India, have we ever realized have we ever even tried to relish the music of Santoor, the classical rags, Rag Bhairavi, Rag Malkauns, Rag Darbari, or whatever? Or the Bhagavad Gita, have we taken Sanskrit seriously? Have we tried to learn the Bhagavad Gita, even as we are gifting these things to foreign citizens? So that's where my journey started. And then even though I went as a software engineer to the US, as soon as I could, I left my IT career completely, became a student of Indian cultural traditions, got my master's and PhD from the US, taught in the US, and now back in India and teaching India to Indian students right here at Prem University in Pune. So that was my brief story. My own inspiration to keep discovering India. When we lose something, we tend to realize the importance, right? As I was losing my motherland, I started waking up and it started taking my heritage, our heritage, more seriously. That was the inspiration that I had when I started taking these things seriously. So now the second slide I want to show you is this. So if you look at why should we take India seriously? So even economically, forget about philosophy, spirituality and all that, but even economically, if you look at the 2000 years of history of the world, economic history of the world, if you start from this left column, so India's share of the world GDP was almost how much? Student, right? So 10, 20, 30, almost 40% of world GDP was in the hands of India. That was first year, 2000 years back. So first CE, 1 CE. Then if you come to 1000 CE, India's share of world GDP is still almost 40%, right? Then come to, let's say, 1700 or even 1820, right? Come to 1820. India's share of world GDP is how much? Almost 25%. 25% of world GDP until 1820, when the British Raj really started, ripping away every wealth of India. Until that time, India's share of world GDP was really high. Almost, India and China basically economically were the two leaders of the world economically. So China and India, if we combine together, almost 70% of world GDP was in the hands of China and India. But only within last 200 years, we see India's share of world GDP comes to really, really very less. Now it's, I guess, less than 10% in 2017. It may be a bit more now that we have overtaken UK also. So what I'm saying is that for the last 2000 years, if we really want to understand world history economically also, we cannot ignore India. We have to take India seriously, because we cannot judge India by the last 200 years of performance economically. Because if you take a longer look, this is the study by world historians, this is not a Indian political view. This is an academic view of world history, and which portrays that China and India are to be taken very seriously. And now the tables are already turning in the favor of China and India again emerging at the world scale. So even today, when McKinsey CEO, when he compares India with other economies, he says, and his name is Bob Sternfields, he says that it is not India's decade, it is India's century. India is being taken seriously by global corporations, global governments, global NGOs everywhere in the world. You cannot ignore India in any parameter. So, and another parameter, if you look at 2022-23 GDP growth in first quarter, we see India at 13.5%. Most rapidly growing economy in the world today is India. Spain 1.1, Italy, France, China, Germany, UK, and US were negative in this current year, the current year that is going on right now. India is the fastest growing economy. So India has to be taken seriously. It is being taken seriously by the world, and it is time for us to also take India seriously as we develop our careers, as you all think of your careers in whichever field you choose. So that was economy and industry and so on. Now let's take a look at ecology. So in terms of ecology, India is called the greenest country in the world, not by us, not by Indians, but by National Geographic magazine. It's a US-based magazine that counted the carbon footprint of major world economies such as Brazil and China and UK, France, Germany, US, Canada, Australia. And every year that it counted, India's carbon footprint came to be the lowest, which means India is the most sustainable economy in the world from 2008 to 2014. So 2014 was the last time they counted this carbon footprint. And because of our housing style, so our usage of central air conditioning, central heating, our water needs, our housing sizes, our home sizes, our usage of appliances, our transportation usage, our food habits, bottled water habits, vegetarian habits, and so on, our consumer goods habits. So our consumerism is still much less compared to major economies of the world, such as Australia, Brazil, China, US, UK, France, Spain, and so on. So India was called as late as 2014 as the greenest economy in the world. So economically, it's important, as I showed in the previous slides. Ecologically, it is significantly important because of our unique role models that we can portray to the world, that how should a large country, large population such as India can still live without harming its environment. So that's another question, another viewpoint that I want to share with you. Let's see, there was no, not the sarcasm, but it's a really because of the per capita carbon footprint, India was and still called one of the greenest countries in the world, and even the greenest economy in the world as late as 2014. Right. Now, why was this called? Now, if you compare the meat consumption by major countries in the world, such as US, Brazil, Canada, UK, China, Kenya, and India, Indian meat consumption per capita is even less than Kenya, and of course less than China, UK, Canada, Brazil, and US, because our per person meat consumption even today is really relatively much less compared to major economies of the world. What it does is, because we consume less meat, that leads to our less carbon footprint per capita compared to major other economies of the world. Because meat consumption is directly linked with climate change. If you Google for meat consumption and climate change, you will see many scientific reports, media reports, United Nations reports, that meat consumption is one of the biggest reasons for climate change, one of the biggest reasons for huge carbon footprint. Because our meat consumption is less, our carbon footprint is also less. So that's another unique perspective towards India, how India is unique and important ecologically. Then if you take a look at this second chart here, we see that the passenger car density in India, as late as this is from 2013, even in 2013, per person car in India is less than China, Indonesia, South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, and all, Russia, US, UK, Spain, France, all the major countries. If we compare, our per person car ownership is still very less. So what these two graphs can indicate is that even as we are growing economically, even as we are growing, of course, demographically, our consumption habits, consumerist habits, are still less than many countries in the world. So that keeps our carbon footprint very less. Right? So that's another perspective why India matters to the world, why India should matter to us also. Now, these two phenomena, vegetarianism, less meat consumption, and minimalism. If you Google for minimalism, you will see only US-based pages where US people, American people, are now living minimally. What that means is they live in smaller houses. They have stopped buying large furnitures. They are really interested in cutting down their carbon footprint, even though they can afford it. Now, these two habits are almost ingrained in our DNA for thousands of years. Even though we could afford, we would not prefer meat. We would still, even today in India, McDonald's cannot sell beef because of our cultural habits, cultural traditions. It has to have vegetarian options. That's one example. Another example of minimalism is, even though many multimillionaires until last century, many multimillionaires who used to live very frugally, even though they could afford Mercedes and so on, they would still prefer to live or even walk to their workplace. What it shows is that they didn't believe in flaunting their wealth. They believed in recycling their wealth by doing charity activities. For example, they would build large hospitals, large schools, colleges, instead of building large houses for themselves. So that selfish, self-centered expenditure on their own luxuries was not a common practice, at least until recently. It might be changing now because we believe in, some of us believe in copying the wrong habits of Western people. Then it might happen here also. But until recently, our people, our even rich people, wealthy people, believed in living frugally, living very minimally. Minimalism, which is now catching the Western world. We already believed and lived by minimalism. We believed and lived by vegetarianism. All right, now, even today, so what these two things do is that they keep our carbon footprint very less. Now, that ecological significance of India is now also can be seen by this global solar alliance that India leads, in which we want to promote solar energy. We want to reduce our carbon footprint. So India took the lead and launched this solar alliance, which is now being joined by all the major economies, the major countries of the world, including US and UK, Canada, France, and so on. So India had set its target to avoid fossil fuel energy for 2040. But we already achieved those goals even last year. 7-8 years before the target date, we are already 40% of entire country's energy needs are now being served by renewable energy, not by fossil fuel. So that shows our commitment that we want to keep living sustainably instead of harming our energy, instead of harming our nature, our environment. All right, next slide is now if you think of India, we think of course, the India is this part of the world. But I would like to suggest to you that today India is not just a piece of land. India is its diaspora, which is the largest diaspora in the world. Anywhere you go, any part of the world you go, you cannot have any country, almost no country in the world has no India. So every country in the world today has some Indians. So Indian diaspora today is the largest diaspora in the world in terms of number of people outside the homeland. So outside India, this is the largest diaspora. Also in terms of foreign remittance. So Indians, wherever they are living, they might be living in Russia, China, Australia, New Zealand, Chile, Brazil, Suriname, Trinidad, Canada, United States, United Kingdom, wherever they are sending hundreds of millions of dollars, pounds, whatever foreign currency back to their home country. So that is also largest. So that is a significant power that we Indians, power not in a hegemonic sense, but our presence is now worldwide. India exists across the world, not just in our home country. Right? That's another perspective I want to show you why India matters, why India should be an inspiration for us. Now, if you look at the Yoga Day, every June we celebrate Yoga Day. Many of us do. But Yoga Day, again, is not just limited within India. Yoga Day is now a global phenomenon, where when India proposed this International Yoga Day at the United Nations, more than 100 countries also joined India in proposing that they want to celebrate yoga. It is not just that it is some India or Hindu thing or Jain or Buddhist thing, but it's a global phenomenon. Everybody wants to practice yoga. That itself is another example of India's soft power that is being celebrated by world over, not just by Indians. So that's another example of the Indian traditions such as yoga that are trying to contribute to world global health in very significant way across the world. And most Most importantly, when the yoga day comes, everybody is practicing yoga across the world, and you can see this map from across the world. All right, now I take you back to the diaspora that existed 2,000 years back. I talked about diaspora today, but even 2,000 years back, after the death of the Buddha that happened about 2,500 years ago from now, in the last 2,000 years back, Buddhist traditions, Buddhist teachings were already spreading across the world, at least across Asia. So Indian diaspora had started forming with the Buddha, after the Buddha, as far back as, so India, so Bodh Gaya is where Buddha attains his enlightenment. You must have learned this in your history books. From Bodh Gaya, Buddhism goes to Sri Lanka, Buddhism goes to Tibet, from Tibet it goes to China, from China it goes to Japan, Korea, from Sri Lanka it goes to Myanmar, Burma, from Burma to Thailand, Thailand to Laos, Laos to China, and so on. So Buddhism itself took India's message to far away countries as far back as Japan. If you go to Japan today, and I did go to Japan a couple of years back, you see large, huge statues of Buddha all over Japan. You see large, huge golden statues of Buddha in Thailand, and on and on. So Buddhism had already taken India's message to across Asia. So historically also, India mattered to world, at least it mattered to Asia for sure, as this map shows. Now, Hindu diaspora, in terms of Hindu diaspora, Hindu messages or Hindu traditions started spreading across the world when the Chola Empire started spreading from Tamil Nadu all the way to Indonesia, Myanmar, Thailand, and Sri Lanka, and so on. As Chola Empire, there was a recent film by Mani Ratnam, PS1, I don't know, some of you might have seen it, with Aishwarya Rai as the protagonist, and that shows Chola Empire. But that film, what it did not show was that Chola Empire was actually a real phenomenon, historical phenomenon that spread across Asia. And when the empire spread so far, as far back as Cambodia and Indonesia and so on, it took Ramayana, one of the most popular Hindu texts, Indic texts, to all across Asia. So today Ramayana is being played in Cambodia. It's called as Ram Kirti, Thailand, Ram Kian. It's played in Malaysia. Ram Lila is being performed in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Laos, in Japan, and in China. All across Asia, even today, Ramayana is a living phenomenon. Now, this image that I've shown you here, this is an image of a Ramayana, which is a 2D animation film, which was made not by Indians, not in India, but it was made in Japan, a Nippon Ramayana film presentation. Nippon means Japan. So Japanese people, filmmakers, were and are still so much in love and reverence for the Ramayana that they've made this 2D animation, which remains one of the most popular online Ramayana versions across the world. Ramayana is even in Malaysia and Indonesia, which are largely Muslim countries, the model for an Islamic prince remains Lord Ram, Sri Ram. In Thailand, which is a Buddhist country, the role model for royal dynasty remains Ram. It even has an Ayodhya in Thailand. This picture I took when I went to Thailand. There is a city which is modeled after, named after Ayodhya. This is the picture from there. Then Korea. When I went to Ayodhya last week, I was in Ayodhya, Uttar Pradesh for some research. And I found that in Ayodhya, there is a Korean park because Korean people believe that one of their founding queens had traveled from Ayodhya to Korea. So even today, they have a park in their queen's memory in Ayodhya. So Korea connection to Ayodhya. So Ramayana's connection to Korea. And so like I said, Laos, Burma, Cambodia, Philippines, Sri Lanka, China, Japan, Mongolia, Iran, Russia. And when I was doing my research, I learned that more than 150 countries across the world has some form of Ramayana, and that is being played all year round. So Ramayana is not just an Indian phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon now. So again, showing you different glimpses of India and its traditions and their footprint across the world. Now that we are talking about ancient history, so let me show you some more evidence and some more interesting phenomena that can be a role model, that can be learning example for us and for the world. So if you go back 4000 BCE, so that is 6,000 years from now, the two cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, which are today in Pakistan, but they were part of Indus Valley civilization. I'm sure you've learned that in your history textbooks. In that Harappa and Mohenjo-daro cities, they had underground drainage. They had civil sanitation, hydraulic engineering to transport water, air cooling architecture to keep their buildings cool. They had perpendicular street system, almost what you see in European cities such as, or American cities such as New York, where avenues and streets are perpendicular. Indus Valley civilization cities were based on that system. Who knows? Modern architects of modern cities might have taken some ideas from there. Own baked bricks were also being used there. And let's see, there is something in chat window. Yes, that's exactly correct. Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad, and Tobago has high concentration of Indians and Hindus. Suriname is in South America. Guyana, Trinidad, Tobago are in Central America, between North and South America. Yes, that's absolutely correct. Then Takshashila, which in English is spelled as Takshila, but the word is Takshashila, which is in modern day Pakistan, Afghanistan border areas. And that had a university as far back as 7th century BCE. So 2,700 years from now, one of the world's oldest universities existed. That was in Takshila. Again, showing you some glimpses of something unique that India contributed to the world, where Takshashila was one of the universities where students came from across the world, across Asia certainly. They came to Takshashila, they learned Indian traditions, philosophical traditions in Takshashila, and also Nalanda. I forgot to mention here Nalanda, but Nalanda is another university in present-day Bihar, where Wensang and Fayang, two Chinese travelers, they walked almost 10,000 miles on foot, round trip, China to Nalanda, that is China to India and back. 10,000 miles on foot they walked, because they wanted to come to India and learn something from India. So from China, he went to Tibet to almost touching the border of Turkey, from Turkey to Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and finally India. So it took such a long route because there was no direct connection. There was no other transportation means. So he had to walk all the way across Himalayas and come to Nalanda. And as he reaches Nalanda, he just starts crying that this was my life's mission, and I'm finally at my promised land, almost like a dream land. That was my dream. And he reaches the place where Buddha got his enlightenment, and he starts crying. And he learns our language, Indian languages, Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit. He translates some of our texts. And when he goes back to China, he has a truckload, not truckload, there was no truck, but an elephant load of books of Buddhism, Jain, Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit. And he takes those books back to China. And today, when Nalanda got burnt, when invaders came to India, they destroyed Nalanda University. So many of our texts were lost. But the books that were lost in Nalanda were kept alive in China because of the efforts by Wensang and Fayang, who took that text and translated in Chinese. And even today, that knowledge is safe and secure back in China. What India taught to the world. Another example, what India taught to China. All right, what India taught to the world. India taught mathematics, astronomy, and music. At least India can teach these things even today. So what India discovered in terms of mathematics is numerals, the digits that we use even today, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those digits were discovered in India. Decimal point, 5.3, 5.6, whatever. Decimal point discovered in India. 0, discovered in India. 0, first time inscription found is at the Gwalior Fort. Even today, if you go to the Gwalior Fort, anybody from Madhya Pradesh can attest to that. If you go to Gwalior Fort, there is a wall where 0 is inscribed. Geometry, algebra, and calculus, many theories came also from ancient Indian texts. Astronomy, 9 planets were always mentioned in many ancient texts of Hinduism, Jainism, and so on. In music, we had a text in Sanskrit Natya Shastra written by Bharat Muni that first talked about fourfold division of music. We were the first that came up with this fourfold division of idiophones, membranophones, chordophones, and aerophones. So this fourfold division of musical instruments was first done by India. Let me see in chat window, somebody has written. Yes, Aryabhat, of course. Aryabhat discovered 0 for the first time. All right, so music also, our tradition of musical instruments, musical art of singing, art of playing musical instrument, and even art of appreciating music is also unique to India. Nowhere else you find in the world where music is an integral part of films and dramas and plays and Ram Leela and Krishna Leela and so on. No film, almost no film in India, even today, in Hindi, Malayalam, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, Bengali, any language film, you cannot imagine our films without music. Every film must have 5, 6 or more songs. Most of our films, there are some films which are now, which were also made without music, but music is always integral part of our films and dramas and plays and so on. Why? Because of this theory given in Natya Shastra by Bharat Muni, that the audience must enjoy all kinds of flavors, all kinds of masala at the same time, instead of the buffet style. Buffet style is the Western style, but our style is the thali style, in which we enjoy, we relish all masalas together. We need some curds, we need some pickle, we need some spices, we need some sweets, we need some wheat, rice, dal, all of the things together in a thali with 4, 5, 6 katoris and everything served together. That is the theory, that is the appreciation of music and films that was first written by Bharat Muni in Natya Shastra 2000 years back, that continues to influence our films, that keeps our films and our music most unique in the world. Nowhere else in the world you find such music and such film. That is why they are now being accepted worldwide. Bollywood is a global phenomenon now. Not just today, but even as old as Mother India. There was a film in 1950s called Mother India that played for hundreds or many hundreds of days in South America and Africa. So our films were always unique, always popular across the world because they were unique, because they conveyed something unique. And that was based on this unique history of films and music. And more on astronomy and mathematics, Aryabhatta, we already mentioned, computation, geometry, arithmetic, time, etc. were discovered by, where various theories were given by Aryabhatta. Value of pi, 3.14, we know in maths. But our people, our ancient people, almost 2000 years back, they had already calculated the value of pi, which they discovered as this. They had calculated the diameter of Earth without NASA, without ISRO, without telescope, without any giant instruments. They could calculate the diameter of Earth. They could calculate the circumference of Earth. They could calculate velocity of the sun. They came up with trigonometry theories. They came up with quadratic equations, Brahmgupta and Barham here, negative numbers, -1 under square root of -1, which is now used for many, many algorithms, was already discovered by our people hundreds of years back, right? And equations of higher order than 2, not just quadratic equation, but even higher than 2, were also being used by Bhaskar 1 and Bhaskar 2. Madhvacharya had also discovered trigonometric functions, sine, cosine, tangent. You have these things in your geometry and trigonometry. They were also used by our people hundreds of years back. So we were always ahead in math and astronomy and many, many other things. All right, more ancient contributions. We influenced Europe and America in terms of languages and linguistics. Our linguistic theories influenced Franz Bopp in 18th century, Saussure in 19th century, Bloomfield in 20th century. So Germany, France, and America, these three linguists, they took our ideas and they developed their own linguistic theories. In terms of philosophy, even before Socrates, Greek philosophers took many ideas from India, such as rebirth and vegetarianism, seeing divinity in nature, which were always integral part of our philosophy, that influenced Greece also. Yoga and meditation, we already mentioned, which is always now a global phenomenon. But even in ancient times, yoga and meditation influenced everybody as Buddhism traveled far and wide across Asia. Even Christianity, some scholars believe that even early Christianity took some ideas from Buddhism in terms of the rituals that were done towards Jesus Christ, the shape of the church, the way rituals were performed. Many of those ideas they took from Buddhism, and it became early parts of Christianity. So literature, romanticist literature in Europe took many ideas from Sanskrit literature, such as written by Kalidas, Abhigyan Shakuntalam. How nature is portrayed in Sanskrit literature influenced European literature. All right. So now in terms of language, let me show you this image now. Sanskrit and all other Indian languages also follow this pattern, where every letter has a fixed place in our mouth. So if you look at the first, so the vowels are separate, consonants are separate only in Indian languages. This very clear demarcation happens. Then among consonants, you see the ka, kha, ga, ghada is pronounced at number 1. This is the place in your mouth. Ka, kha, if you say in your mouth, ka, kha, ga, ghada is all being pronounced at number 1. Cha, cha, ja, ja, ya is at number 2. That's called as palatals. Then cerebral, ta, tha, da, dha, na. Your tongue is in a special shape. when you pronounce the third row, very scientific, very systematic taxonomy of our consonants I'm showing you here. And that's only in India also. Then dental, the, the, na. As your tongue touches your teeth internally, you produce these dental sounds called the, the, na. That's at number 4. And number 5 is pa, pa, ba, bha, ma. These are all sounds coming out of only your lips. Tongue has no role to play there. Pa, pa, ba, bha, ma. I'm showing you more explicitly. So what I'm saying is that the language and the sounds, as they were taught to our students, were very systematically, very scientifically, very rationally organized in a very nice tabular form. And that is also, that has influenced not just Sanskrit, but Tamil, Telugu, Sanskrit, Marathi, Bengali, Assamia, all our languages follow this very, very systematic pattern, unique in India. Again, India matters to us, what India can teach us, why we should take India seriously. Something's really unique in India from India. All right, now coming to medieval times, we were also leaders, at least certainly one of the leaders in steel production. Mind you, 1,000 years from today, we were producing steel. We were always leaders in silk export, the entire silk route, China, India to as far back as Rome, via the Middle East. Textile, we were the leaders. You know, the entire word, the word itself, navigation in maritime, especially, navigation word comes from Navagati, Sanskrit word. Navagati means new directions, new motions, a new movement. So shipbuilding was part of Indian traditions for hundreds of years. Metallurgy, we were leaders in terms of rust-free iron, zinc and alloy. We were the leaders in coming up with these new alloys and so on, brass and bronze and so on. Ecology, we already touched upon in the beginning, but organic agriculture, we always followed that pattern. Of course, there was no chemical fertilizers or pesticides. Forestry, we practiced extremely rational forestry. We had sacred groves in which large patches of forest were taken very seriously, even reverentially. So not a single leaf or not a single twig was taken away from those forests. So we maintained ecology with economy for hundreds of years, even thousands of years. Rainwater harvesting is an ancient Indian phenomenon which is now coming back across the world. Across the world, people are talking about rainwater harvesting that we practiced for thousands of years across India. We also invented chess and snake ladder. Games of chess and snake ladder is another gift from India to the world. Even martial arts, Kung Fu, maybe some of you are learning Kung Fu, Judo, Karate, and so on. That were South Indian cultural tradition, one of the South Indian cultural traditions that Buddhism took from India to China and now Taiwan, now across the world, even in the US and across the world. So Bodhidharma is a Buddhist monk, and he is known as Ta Mo in China. So he is believed to have taken martial arts from India to China. So martial arts also is a gift from India to the world. Now, modern contribution. This image that you see here, this is an image of Shiva. I'm sure most of you would identify that. Nataraj, Shiva. This image is not from an Indian temple, not from a Hindu temple, from anywhere, any part of the world. This is from a laboratory, from a scientific laboratory, quantum physics lab called the CERN Library, CERN, CERN Library in Europe, where they celebrate the discovery of what is called as now God particles, which are the boson particles. Boson particle itself gets the name of boson from Bose, Satyendranath Bose, who inspired Einstein. So Einstein and other quantum scientists wanted to call these new particles as boson in honor of Satyendranath Bose, who was a great scientist from Bengal, from India. And to celebrate his contributions, there is this statue, this image of Nataraj as the replica of the continuous creation and destruction of quantum particles in the universe. That is compared with the Tandav, the Nataraj dance by Shiva. So that is what we celebrate. The scientists are celebrating Nataraj as the replica of the cosmic creation and destruction, as explained by quantum mechanics. So that Schrodinger's quantum mechanics was also inspired by Vedantic philosophy. American literature, T.S. Eliot, Emerson, Thoreau, and Whitman were inspired by Indian philosophies. More Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Mill, James, and Whitehead were all inspired by Indic philosophy. Gandhi's nonviolence, as I'm sure you know, Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela took ideas from Gandhi's nonviolent movement, and they launched their respective movements in US and in South Africa and they change their societies forever in US and in South Africa. That also is India's contribution to the world. Now, more in mathematics, decimal system I already mentioned, but also numbers up to 10 to the raised to the power of 12. That number existed in ancient texts. Then the right angle triangle theorem, which is now attributed to Pythagoras. This theorem was also mentioned in the ancient Indian texts. And then Jain texts also mentioned these 10 mathematical topics of computation, applied math, rho, quantity, fraction, square, cube, and so on. All these complex mathematical topics were also mentioned in the text of Jainism. Ayurveda is another major contribution from India to the world in terms of Bhel Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, and Charak Samhita, where to diagnose various diseases and by touch, look, and question, by pulse, by urine test now, which is a common practice in the modern science also, but urine test, eyes test, facial test, tongue test, feces test, voice and skin test, all these tests were performed by Ayurvedic practitioners for thousands of years. And on and on. So much information I can take more time, but I think bath, pith, and cough, and then all these many things from Ayurveda also. At Flame, what we do, I want to show you a little bit here also. We have what is called as the India Center, and I think I can click and show that screen also to you. Let me know if you can still see the screen, the web page of Flame, the India Center, where we have listed all the courses that we teach at Flame that are uniquely focused on India. And the courses range from Indian philosophy, Jainism, Sanskrit, Urdu. We teach Indian painting, Indian art, ancient India, Mahabharata, Indian cinema, Indian theater, cultural studies. We teach history of Indian music, international relations, of course, Indian economy. All these India-centric courses we teach at Flame, where we explore some of the topics that I've been sharing with you in this webinar. Indian political history, Indian society. We have what is called as discussion. Every second-year student goes to any part of India where they live with other students for a week. They immerse in that program, in that cultural phenomenon. For example, I'm taking some students in February. I'm taking them to Kutch, where we will live with Kutch people to learn Kutch and its cultural traditions, and to really learn by being there. Not just theoretically, but by immersing, taking literally a dip into that part of India. It's called as DIP, but DIP stands for Discover India program, or literally dipping into India's cultural phenomena. We have journalism-based program also. We also teach Indian classical dance, history of Indian dance, Indian and Western comparative, and so on. So I wanted to show you that also a little bit, what we teach exactly at Flame, what I was showing some glimpses in this webinar. Then, I guess last slide I have, and I would be happy to take more of your questions. Where during the COVID time, where India was sending its COVID vaccines across the world, more than 100 countries received vaccines from India. So Brazil, the president of Prime Minister of Brazil tweeted this image thanking India, as if India's ambassador, medical ambassador, he imagined as Hanumanji, bringing the Sanjeevani booty all the way to Brazil. That was the tweet by Brazil. So with that, I would like to take a pause and maybe take your question and get into more details, depending on your interest and what you would like to know more about what we do at Flame, or India in general, India's history or present, or so on.
Also, just a reminder, students, please fill in the feedback form in order to receive your letter of participation. And you can put in your questions in the Q&A section and in the chat section both.
Any questions in chat?
So we have a question in the chat section.
Right, I can read that. SB. Actually, can we unmute their this thing. Why can't they just ask by talking directly?
I'll try, sir.
Yeah, so I think that will make it more interactive.
I can't unmute all of them. Maybe we can just.
Yeah, whoever is asking the question.
Yes, yes.
That,
So, Shravani is asking a question.
Yes, Simrat. I think Simrat Beverly.
I'll just try 1 second.
The question was, meanwhile, I guess I'll read. As a teenager, what I've noticed most of my peers do is confuse globalization with westernization. How should we promote our cultural traditions while still being modern? Yeah, that's the question. Yes, great question. And that was by Shravan. Yeah. Shravan Bhate. Yeah. Okay. Shavani Bhate. Sorry. Yes. Great question. Yeah, Shavani. Yes. So that was the whole idea behind my presentation. So I wanted to present that globalization need not happen just in one way, right? It need not be one way direction that we keep learning or we keep copying what happens in US or other Western countries, right? Globalization can also happen from our side to the rest of the world, right? And that's where Yoga Day, phenomena such as Yoga Day or International Solar Alliance or Bollywood's global influence or global popularity of Ayurveda, all of those things are globalization, but from Indic perspective, right? India's gift for the world. And even Buddhism, like I mentioned in my presentation, Buddhism was happening globally, at least Asia-wide, as far back as China and Japan and Korea, was happening from India to the world. And it was not an imposition. It was not that you must convert to Buddhism or else we will invade you. That never happened. It was very slow, organic, natural spread of these ideas such as Buddhism 2000 years back, or Bollywood or yoga or Ayurveda that is happening even today. And even language such as Sanskrit, which is now being taught and learned worldwide. We did not impose Sanskrit. Indians did not impose Sanskrit to the world, but it was an organic, natural acceptance of these ideas. As the first atomic explosion happened in America, as they were testing, Oppenheimer, the scientist, he was quoting the Bhagavad Gita while he tested the atomic energy or atomic explosion. So we did not impose him that you must quote from the Bhagavad Gita. It was all organic, natural phenomenon. That is what is happening for thousands of years from India for the world. So we need to, as we all, I'm sure many of you will leave India and maybe work in South Korea or Japan or China or US or UK. As you spread far and wide, you must take these ideas. You should be cognizant of India's contributions to the world. And that is what my effort was here, to be aware of India's unique history, unique heritage, and how it has contributed to the world for millennia, for thousands of years. Right?
So we have one more question. I'll just take it for you. If we had so much rich heritage of knowledge now, why do we not see this kind of intellect in our today's society?
Yes. Yes. So many of us actually you're all in 11th or 12th grade, and I think this is the best time to be Indian. When I was growing up, what we were learning in schools were not these things. We were, many of us were still following the British system of education. We lacked the self-confidence back in 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even until 90s. But in today's India, you all are looking at India and seeing India's growth, India's leadership, ecological leadership, economical leadership, technological leadership, cinematic leadership, and on and yogic leadership across the world. You are witnessing that. You're part of that. We were not. I was not. When I was growing up, we were people used to mock us. People across the world used to mock India, saying that India is following the Hindu rate of growth, which was like very painful, slow rate of growth, where there were not enough jobs for everybody. India's share of world GDP was very, very dismally low. India lacked that self-confidence, which is not the case today. Today it is coming back, and intellectually, if we can take that inspiration, each one of you can contribute intellectually to India's growth, not just within India, but across the world. That was my little effort here in my presentation. All right, what's the next question? Yeah, Roshan, can you?
So we have one more question from Nia. She is asking, I feel Bollywood really sensationalizes and exaggerates our Indian history and dramatizes a lot of our culture, portraying us as hooligans. And it creates a lot of misleadingness.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, Anup Kumar, yeah. So again, Bollywood, when we talk of Bollywood, that word came into existence only in last 2 decades. But Indian films were being loved in Russia and China, and as I mentioned, South America and Africa in 1950s, when there was no term called Bollywood. Right? Indian films such as Avara, Shri 420, that was made by Raj Kapoor, or Mother India, that was made by Mehboob Khan with heroine Nargis Dutt, not Nargis Dutt, just Nargis. Those films were being appreciated worldwide because, again, it had some unique mix of some cultural tradition, some music, some emotions, some moral message, some social message that was relevant worldwide. So Indian films, some films, at least in those times, were doing a good service to take India's message of India's culture to across the world, across many countries such as China, Russia, South America, Africa, and so on. But yeah, today it has sort of degenerated. Our films today are not doing that kind of service. But some of the films, I think last great film that I liked as a worldwide with a worldwide appeal was probably Lagan and Jodha Akbar, which showed grand Indian culture and India's message of non-violence, social equality, acceptance of all of those messages I saw in films such as Lagan, at least. That was the last. And now, today's films are not doing that service anymore, unfortunately. But there is a rich heritage, is what I'm saying, even of films.
So Nia is again asking, how can we change a society's view using religion as an ultimate form of logic?
Yes. Yeah, that's another great question. So religion, again, if we analyze the word itself, religion is a English word, right? Religion as a word is based on not Indian heritage. Our traditional word is not religion, but the word is dharma. Dharma, if we analyze the word dissect, what did I do? Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, sorry. I can't see myself. I don't know what I did. Anyway, so anyway, as long as you can see me, it's fine. So so our word is dharma, and if you dissect the word dharma comes from the Sanskrit root dhri, which means to sustain, to support, to uphold. That force, that phenomenon which supports the world, this world, and the entire cosmos is dharma. So it's not just a boundary that creates, it's not a boundary between different sects, but that which transcends all boundary is dharma. So if that is the case, dharma can really inspire people to take care of every being in the universe, because every being is part of us and we are part of every being. So that unites all the entire cosmic beings with us. So if that is the idea, if that is the philosophy, we cannot destroy our trees. We cannot kill any animal. We cannot pollute any river. We cannot destroy any mountaintop. Right? We will be taking care of, we will be reverential towards the earth, towards the mountains, trees, animals, birds, and so on. If that is the idea, if we really take that idea seriously, we can emerge economically while also taking care of our economy. That is one idea, that based on spirituality of India, based on cultural traditions of India, taking religion beyond religion, taking dharma seriously, and connecting us with cosmos.
Right.
All right. Okay.
Any more questions you want to ask students?
Okay, I guess we'll stop.
I don't think we have any more questions, sir.
Yeah. We can stop here now. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
sir.
you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for joining the session. And thank you, sir, for this amazing and enriching session. I'm sure the students are taking back a lot of knowledge with them. And I hope students, everyone, you have filled in the feedback form and you have filled your names correctly, because that is how it is going to come in the letter of participation. And thank you so much. I'll again reshare the link. Okay, if anyone has missed, then you can again fill it. So thank you. It was great having you all with us. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you, students.